Do you feel like your Go High Level account is just not working? Maybe it's super confusing or you can't get the stats that you actually care about. Well, in this video, I'm going to show you the 3-step process that I use to audit and fix messy Go High Level accounts, regardless of what industry you're in. Hi, I'm Ethan, and I've helped over 300 businesses build scalable Go High Level systems. And a common question I get is, can you audit my Go High Level? A lot of the times the Go High Level is simply built on top of each other, meaning workflows are just added as they're needed and there's no real structure. You're going to run into problems where workflows are competing with each other, there's errors, messages getting sent out, and it's going to only multiply as time goes on. I want to clarify that all for you with what I call the triangle method. So the triangle method runs on 3 distinct systems. That's why it's called the triangle method. You've got the pipeline stages up here, you have the statuses down here, and then you have your lead sources over here. And so I've broken it down here on this document into 3 separate points. So point 1 is the pipelines. A lot of people treat their pipelines as if they're to-do lists, but they should actually be the stages of the buyer journey. Typically, you want to move from the left to the right and move across stages as you get closer to the deal. So a quick example is a new lead, an active lead, a booked, they've attended, a proposal sent, and closed. So you can see an example here of what that pipeline might look like. Now, it's really important to pick your pipeline stages as deal stages because it's going to help you track how well you move people across. So for example, a new lead to booked appointment, that will give you your booked appointment rate. This is another visual representation of a tool that I use when I'm onboarding a client. So you have the different stages, and then within those stages, you actually have the processes that you're going to use. For example, the new lead stage, you might have an automated nurture and you might have a power dialer. And I've got a drop down here of the most common tools that I use. After building so many Go High Levels, I've learned that a lot of these things that people do are repeats over and over, and you can chunk them down into these specific steps, and it'll work for pretty much every business out there. Since we're doing an audit, you probably already have some systems that you're using. And so what I would start to do is organize them in this structure where you figure out the pipeline stages, and then you start listing the automations for where they interact in the sales process. This gives you one clear visual layout of what is actually happening, so everybody's on the same page. The next step is lead statuses, because not every lead progresses neatly through the sales process, and you don't want your reps to lose track. So what you do is you create simple statuses such as follow up later, not interested, ghosted, so your sales team knows exactly what they need to do. A status keeps the contact in the specific deal stage so your reporting does not get deleted. Otherwise, if they move stages, you wouldn't have the previous data. So here visually, you can see, for example, a new lead might have a specific status, like someone said, I'm not interested. It would go down here to the statuses, and now we have a new process specific for statuses. And then, of course, you can recover people and you can put them back into your sales process here for a booked appointment, as an example. This way, your sales reps know exactly what to do, and there's a clear action point if something were to happen without breaking any pipeline metric. Point number 3 is sources and attribution. The big problem is that most Go High Level setups have junk data. Lead sources are not really considered. And so I would recommend actually planning ahead of time what sources you care about tracking for your dashboard later on. And I usually recommend that you break it up into 3 to 8 different buckets. Then for each one of those sources, you're going to have capture elements. The most common capture elements are forms, tracking phone numbers, and calendars, but there are more, and you can see here just a list of some of the examples. And you can have multiple tracking elements per source. For example, Google Ads, you might have both a phone number and then also a form. The reason this is so important is because you need to have a specific workflow, what I call a tracking workflow. And the idea is that Go High Level by default will actually put in its own source. So if you use a form or booking calendar, it might actually say the name of that form or booking calendar, and you don't want that to happen. So instead, you want to have a structure that you've defined ahead of time, and you're really intentional about your tracking and your data. And so I would recommend taking a look at all of the sources that you actually care about tracking, really documenting those, finding them through your systems, and then figuring out what capture elements you have for each one of those, and then building an automation for each one of those so that they clearly and neatly go into your Go High Level and your tracking is accurate and your data makes sense. And so I just want to recap the process. So essentially, you're going to look at your pipeline stages. You're going to make sure that any of your processes are nicely and neatly organized, just like this. so everybody knows what's going on. You are going to define what your statuses are, so your salespeople know exactly what to do. Here are just a few examples of lead statuses that you might come up with. And then you're going to define the sources and the exact tracking elements that you are going to use. And so you would organize it maybe in a document like this. And if you have all these pieces, you're going to have clear attribution, predictable follow-ups, and step-by-step optimization opportunities down the line. So if this general process makes sense, then feel free to book an audit with me using the description. I'll go over this exact process for your business, and I'll show you how you can even scale past this using other best practices that I have specific to your situation. Again, I've built SOP documents over 250 pages worth. Have over 9 years building CRMs. I've built over 300 go high levels. And I actually build systems that scale for businesses. And so if you want to see this strategy applied to your business, again, feel free to book in, and I'm looking forward to working with you either through coaching or through actually building your system as well. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.